Welcome to the panel on mentoring students and colleagues in the time of COVID-19. My name is Nancy Amato, and I'm the moderator for this session. I'm the department head at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I'm a CRA and CRA-WP board member and longstanding co-director of the CRA-WP DRU program. The abrupt transition to online teaching and remote work has created unprecedented and unique challenges for universities and has caused normal practices to be revised in how they are implemented. The uncertainty of our present situation, the loss of normal support systems, and the addition of new responsibilities have placed a tremendous strain on everyone, from department chairs to faculty and students and staff. This stress has increased for many since the killing of George Floyd and the ensuing social unrest and national conversations about systemic racism. During turbulent and unsettled times such as these, mentoring is even more crucial than before, but it is in danger of being neglected as other things can seem more urgent or pressing. This session will discuss how to adjust and maintain effective mentoring practices for students and faculty in our new reality. For students, we will provide tips on how to keep them engaged and accountable now that they are working remotely and often living alone, and how to adjust orientation practices for incoming students. We will cover challenges for faculty with children and also highlight unique issues for those just starting their faculty careers during the COVID crisis. Overall, we will discuss our shared commitment to providing equal opportunity to all, more challenging but also more important during these times, and we'll provide suggestions on how to affect the systemic change that society is demanding of us. We have a great set of panelists that will seed our discussions by sharing their thoughts. First, Maria Gini from the University of Minnesota, CRA-WP board member and grad cohort co-chair, and recent CRA Haberman awardee, will provide her tips and advice on how to support students. Next, Ellen Zagura from Georgia Tech and CRA board chair will remind us of the special challenges that faculty trying to start off their academic careers are facing during these rather strange times. Finally, Chad Jenkins from the University of Michigan and CRA-WP board member and DRU program co-director will help us consider how the current social unrest and heightened awareness of racial injustice impacts our students and faculty and what we can do about it. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to our speakers.
Hi, I'm Maria Gini from the University of Minnesota. I'm going to share a few ideas of things I'm doing with my students just to maintain them and keep them engaged in this kind of messy, complicated time in which most of them live alone, and so they don't have a lot of social interactions. The first idea is something that I always do in my classes. I have every week what I call an in-class exercise. I give a problem, written pieces of paper. I give them to the students, give them 10-15 minutes. They can work alone or with groups, discuss as they want, answer the question. I collect the answers. I give them credit for being in class and answering, not for being correct. And I give them feedback. And this in general is a good way of encouraging the student to attend class. When we started moving online, I decided to do the same thing. I give them about 24 hours of time, and I give the same situation, same credit, number of points, same arrangements. I found out that it was working very well. Most of the students were doing those things. So I started increasing the number of those exercises to 2 per week. And at the end of the semester, I had a class of 150 students, upper division, undergraduate AI class. All of them passed the class with at least a C-. And I didn't lower my standards. So they really, by forcing them to work harder, they really learned the material and they really did well. So this is something that worked very well, and I'll keep on using this idea. The next point I like to make is to do more with my group, the students I work on research project, graduate, undergraduates, PhD, master students. I learned to use one idea that I own to Nancy, I know she's been doing for a long time. And the idea is to ask the student at the beginning of the week to write down for themselves the plan, what they plan on doing that week. And through the week, keep track as much as possible of the time that they spent doing things, what they've done. So by Friday, they go back to their list and they can reflect and see, what did I do? Did I do what I was think you're doing. Maybe I did more, it is something different. Maybe I didn't work as hard as I was planning. And then they plan for the next week. They told me that this really helps them because with this unstructured time, it's very easy for some of them at least to get completely lost and not keeping track of how much they're really working on their own project. So very good idea, very valuable. The last thing I'd like to mention here is an opportunity that we got for this COVID-19 situation. When new graduate students come to my group at the beginning of the semester, I kind of talk with them. We have meetings and we get lunch together and we start to become familiar with each other. Now, because it doesn't matter where they are, I invited them to connect on Zoom with my group meetings. I have group meetings once a week, an hour, also during summer. So I invited them to join. So they say, you can start knowing the students in the group. I asked them to give a short talk on their own work, what they've done as undergraduate, the kind of things they like, a little bit of personal information, maybe share some pictures. And they've done it and worked very well, even better than I expected. I learned one of the students ran a marathon, which is very impressive to me. And everybody kind of knows each other better. So when the semester starts, the class starts, they will feel already at home as opposed to becoming new kids on the block. I highly recommend everybody to think about this. It doesn't cost much, and I'm sure the student will be very happy.
Hi, everyone. Ellen Zagura again. If you haven't figured that out by now, you probably never will. I'm happy to be part of this panel on mentoring, and I really wanted to primarily highlight a particular portion of our community where I think there's a significant mentoring need, especially during this current time, actually all the time, but especially during this current time, and that is junior faculty. Maybe most of you are in leadership roles and are relatively senior, so you'll have your own graduate students and undergraduates who you also are available to as a mentor, but many of you will be in a position to interact with and provide support to junior faculty members, and hopefully will also view that as part of your job responsibilities. So junior faculty, of course, are always under a fair amount of stress, and the disruption of COVID hits them in at least two significant ways. One, they have relatively little teaching experience, and so being asked to make a transition to online teaching in the spring, and then for the fall to be prepared for, at least at my university, some as yet uncertain hybrid of in-person and online, and both at the same time, and switching at any instant between the two. Is adding stress and time, frankly, to our teaching preparation. And for junior people who are new to teaching, that stress and time addition is even more substantial. So reassuring faculty that it is not their responsibility to bear all of the burden of making a difficult situation perfect somehow, I think is a really important message for us to send to faculty. And I think sometimes our universities actually send the opposite message. We're all in this together. You need to learn how to do this, that, and the other with your teaching, with very little acknowledgement of the extra time and burden that places on faculty whose time has not multiplied, just because we maybe are not commuting quite as much. The second thing I wanted to say is that in terms of getting a lab and a research group started, not being present with your students, not being in the lab space, not being able to easily build a lab camaraderie, these have huge effects for junior people. Many will have recruited graduate students who are deferring for a semester or deferring for longer, and we all remember how critical those early graduate students are for getting our careers off to a good start. And that uh, that lasts. Those early students and those early projects are what produce the papers and the PhD who goes off to a job that you can put onto your tenure materials, and then you build up a pipeline, and the others finish later. But the first ones are really important, and so I think being able to talk to faculty about how we will not forget that they were at a vulnerable and important time in their careers when there was a disruption that no one could anticipate and that had a major effect and not just a limited effect, will make a difference. Then, of course, we also have to follow through on that. We have to bring that awareness and that consideration to promotion and tenure committee discussions and to evaluations of materials. And we can't just say the empty words that will be remembered. We have to act on that. So I hope many of you will be thinking in these directions and will be able to both reassure and follow through on that reassurance with your faculty. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Chad Jenkins from the University of Michigan. Thank you very much for having me at the CRA conference and having me on this panel about mentoring. I just want to give some thoughts about the systemic aspects of our jobs as mentors and our responsibility, given all the privileges that we have as a wonderful profession in computing. And so I would just ask this question: how will history judge our mentoring? And so to give some perspective on this, let's go back to Memorial Day. And we saw the brutality, the world saw the brutality that's been imposed on Black people in America for some time. And I think that led to an outpouring of questions about what are we doing as a society and what can we do better. And so this led to many people asking, what can we do better in computing? And so this led a number of people in our community to compose the Black in Computing and our allies letter, open letter, and call to action for equity and fairness in our field. And this really is giving some ideas about how we can do better to address these systemic problems in computing. And this led to a number of great letters. My personal favorite from computer science departments is the letter from the University of Maryland, which felt very tangible and actionable. But the real issue is that these things are very abstract. And so I think, still rather abstract, but if we get to the heart of some of these issues, I would go back to July 9th of this year, my 46th birthday, and to address an issue that I think is more to the heart of our issues of mentoring in computer science. And that's the issues of Robert Williams, who was arrested based off of a false face positive recognition. In Robert Williams' case, police, law enforcement in Farmington Hills, Detroit police, essentially used used a facial recognition system to essentially identify and then go to his house and arrest Mr. Williams in front of his family, in front of his kids. He was detained for 30 hours and is, I believe, still trying to get this off of his record. And so this is something that was caused. We have to take responsibility for this as a field. And we should know that the people that we are mentoring now are the people that are going to build these systems and also have and sometimes be the people that are impacted by those systems. And so what I would argue in our mentoring is that computing needs more empathy. The way we do things in our degree programs, our mentoring of new research students, and our mentoring of people throughout their career needs greater empathy because our work has real consequences. When I think about that mentoring, that history, I think of the quest for artificial intelligence and where we've been able to think about all the people in the field. And there are no Black researchers that really have come up to the level that Nils Nilsson would refer to them in his book. Although it's a great book, I really like reading it. It talks about all the history of funding and how that's catalyzed developments to lead to the AI that we've had today. This isn't just a historical trend. If you look at participation of minorities in the workforce and as well as women, we see that participation, the equity of our participation falls way behind population, and this leads to what we call disparate impact. And that disparate impact doesn't mean that you have that you're forbidding people from doing things, but there is something that is disadvantaging certain groups, and that there is a certain implicit discrimination. And that discrimination has a big impact on the outputs of our of our field in computing, and that these disparate impacts lead to biases in our software, but also biases in the culture of how how our artifacts are developed. I've been giving talks for a few years about what we can do to affect change in our culture. And these really just come down to eliminating the double standards in our programs. And if we can do that, we can eliminate the disparate impacts. But it goes further than that, in that that's just sort of looking at what's happened today, but are we invested in the systemic change that's happened over time? And are we invested in that? The time we spend as mentors, the money we spend to fund and support people who could benefit from that mentorship, but also the mentors that are providing good mentorship to various people across the socioeconomic spectrum, across the world, across all walks of life. And to get to the issue of those systemic issues, I would say that we have an economic issue. If we get back to the heart of what the founding of the country was founded off of the uncompensated labor of Black Americans. And that economic engine really that we have from picking is that led to the growth of the country in the 1800s and so forth, still continues today in the new millennium, where we have pickers that are essentially essential workers at the heart of our system. And so a lot of us who are Black in computing ask ourselves, is the AI that we're building today essentially going to be the cotton gin of what we had in the 1800s? When we think about that, the question of investing in fairness means that we look at programs, we talk about fairness, but are we really investing in it? And so there are programs that deal with fairness and artificial intelligence that still have some issues. We think about Amazon, for instance, who has sponsored this award. If you think about who they funded over their time of having research awards, they funded, many people, no Black researchers, and that leads to a very troubling trend. When we think about the National Science Foundation, which was founded by Vannevar Bush, if you look at his namesake faculty fellowship and who the system had provided, have we mentored Black researchers so that they could get to the point to win this highly prestigious award that's worth $3 million? We found that only 1 in 300 awardees of this very prestigious honor is Black. I would challenge you to spot that person on the screen. And that means of the $300+ million that have been given out, less than 3 million have been given to support Black researchers. In addition, we see in the future that there's a lot of money, a lot of resources that are going to come into computing through artificial intelligence, which could lead to systemic change. But what's happening is when we're thinking about this, we're thinking of issues of fairness, of bias, of transparency, ethics, and all of these are very nebulous. But for the people that are concerned about civil rights and the struggle to live up to America's founding values, equal opportunity is something that should be first and foremost as part of that consideration. And there are some troubling trends that when we're thinking about this future, that when we have these discussions, they're oftentimes zero descendants of American slavery and segregation, or people and the descendants of the civil rights movement as part of these discussions. That includes things that are done by CRA. And I know that we have good people that are trying to help us, trying to help do better, but we still have tremendous room for improvement. And so what I would ask as what we think about this panel is that how will history judge our mentoring and our merit review when we think about the founding of the country, when we think about what's happened to this point and what's going to happen in the future and how we invest our time and our money? That is a major consideration that we should have as part of the core of our field, just as important as the technical work that we do. So I welcome further discussion and thank you very much for listening.
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks to our panelists. I think we had a lot of good things to think about. And hopefully it's working all right. So we have some good questions started. I think we'll start off with one, which was, many of us 2020 chairs will no longer be chairs 5.25 years from now when young assistant professors come up for tenure. What guarantees can we make to them? I think maybe Ellen, you want to start off with that?
Yeah, sure. Let me start with that. So I guess I have, there are a couple of things to say about that. So you might not be chair, but presumably you'll be a senior member of your department. And so you will still be in an influential position, not only, you know, within the department, but also hopefully the future chair will look to you as someone that they rely on to mentor them through their chair role. So you'll still be in your local community. You will also still be writing letters for people. So you know, the letters that are part of promotion and tenure processes are incredibly important. And I think for the whole community, this is something for us to keep in mind when we start to see these cases that come up for people who were affected by COVID. So it's chairs have some role, obviously, important role in the RPT process. They, at least at my institution, they're one step, so they can't influence the whole thing by any means. And senior faculty through letter writing and through participation also have an important role to play.
So go ahead, Chad.
I was just going to add to that you know, that really it's the department chair offers one viewpoint, but it's really the culture of the unit itself that you know, and what they value and how they're calibrated that really has that really can help your junior faculty, and you know, and help both mentoring of the junior faculty member, but also calibration of your colleagues. I know that when I came up as a junior faculty member, that's when funding rates at NSF went into the single digits, and career, and it made things really stressful when you're thinking about career proposals and career awards. And so I was grateful that that I had a good mentor that could calibrate expectations and relay the concerns of the current climate or the current situation in the nation to decisions that the department were making.
Thank you, Chad. Maria, do you have anything to add?
No, I think the key things is always, I mean, as everybody's already mentioned, if you have a nice environment in the department where people are really friendly with each other, know each other, talk with each other, then everybody will kind of do fine. The complicated part, I think, is departments are very competitive, in which you kind of bring in the junior faculty and say, show to me that you can succeed, as opposed to say, come here, how can I help you? And that makes always a big difference.
Great comments. We have another, I think, really important question. What can chairs do to support junior colleagues in family situations that are complicated by COVID-19, caring for children, parents, high-risk spouses? And I would say we could also expand this to not only junior colleagues, it impacts everyone. Who would like to take a first stab at that one? Maria? Ellen?
I mean, I can take a stab. I think it's complicated to come up with a general answer because each case is different. So I have, for instance, at this point, I just discovered one of my PhD students has some anxiety and stress, and I didn't really realize it because she's very talkative. So now I'm trying to figure out what's the best way of me helping her. And she's very successful. She's done very well in coursework. You know, she's very energetic, but then you kind of discover this kind of a side that she didn't really want to show, and I kind of discovered by chance. And so now I'm trying to figure out how much can I help her. And I think just the fact that I'm helping her and trying to figure out, you know, what she can do, hopefully will make a difference. In other cases, again, sometimes people are very private, and I would always respect their privacy. So they don't really want to say that they have issues, that they have problems, and that makes it harder to talk. I really don't know how can you break. I mean, in person, things are much easier, right? Because you can kind of see, but now you just see itself on each other in TV. So I don't have a good answer. In fact, I really like to hear other suggestions.
I'm willing to go for it, but I would say that actually this is not you know, a situation that I think has to be handled, but really an opportunity to think about about our systems and maybe the change that we need to make in terms of how we're evaluating people. We oftentimes see individuals and their work as things that need to be quality controlled and do gatekeeping on them. But maybe this is an opportunity to have a bit more empathy and to know that you're invested in both your junior colleagues and your students. To look at, I think, as Maria said, take time to look at their individual situation and take time to provide some connection to that and see how you can help them move forward and progress. I think everybody's always worried about these, about these stages where you're evaluated and it's determined whether you can move forward. Even though we're not supposed to use the word pipeline, I think we still have a pipeline mentality when it comes to how we think about the systems in the systems in computing research. And so maybe it's time to reevaluate, whether that pipeline is going to produce the outcomes that we'd like to see, and invest in the mentoring that would be needed to change that structure.
So I'll jump in, Nancy?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think this issue is unbelievably hard, and I don't think there are any really easy answers. I think I'm sort of, I was troubled by the earlier panel where Laura Haas shared some of the results from a survey and showing that, and this is completely believable, that for some people, their productivity has gone up with COVID-19. And while for other people, the productivity has gone way down. And typically the ones whose productivity has gone down are those who have all these extra responsibilities at home. And so that says it's not just that we're all in this together in the same way. We actually have this disparate impact where for some people, they're more productive now. And to me, it's just a huge concern. And I wish, Chad, we would use this as an opportunity to get to that more empathetic and better place about how we evaluate. I'm not real optimistic about that across the board. And so, these kind of, there is some around the edges kinds of things that are done that people are thinking about, like reducing service load. I also think it's, and I said this in the canned part, look, it's not right to ask faculty to spend outrageous amounts of time making their fall class unbelievably awesome online. It's not right. It isn't, we have to do all the other parts of our job also. And students cut some slack in the spring. They're going to have to cut some slack in the fall. You can't tell someone it's now your job to make the students have an amazing online experience. Online experiences have a bunch of stuff about them that suck, no matter how much time you put into it. And anyone who's offered one of these online courses has put huge amounts of time, not doing it under pressure, just wanting to do it, huge amounts of time into it. And it's not right to ask faculty to be the ones who put in, who bear all the burden for that. So anyway, that's mine.
I wanted to offer a few things. I do have hope. I'm going to push back and say, I do think we can have some empathy. It starts by not just considering whenever somebody brings a potential, let's say, faculty candidate or somebody who's coming up for promotion, one of the first things we do is we look at their Google Scholar profile, which I think is an absolute mistake. Because that boils people down to just this one number, just the number of entries that they have. And I think that's a problem with the system and how we do things. I think trying to make I think in terms of the empathy, one thing I will say is that one thing that minority faculty really dislike are the customer service satisfaction surveys that pose as teaching evaluations. And I think, and I don't read those anymore post tenure, but the thing that I've learned from the feedback that I get from students is that if I do have some empathy, they know that I can't do everything. They know that I probably won't be able to provide an amazing online experience for them. But if I take the opportunity to try to connect with them, to help them to understand their situation, that they will at least they will know that we're in it together. And I think that is what they're asking from us more than anything else.
Yeah, I totally agree, Chad. Ellen, do you want to respond or should we move on to another question?
I was just going to say, I think that's totally right about the students. What I'm worried about is that the administration is asking something different of us in terms of the quality of the experience for the students, because they're so sensitive to the financial implications of of the student experience. But I totally agree with you that the students, that's where I'll put my optimism.
Yeah, and I think, although I'm a moderator, I'll just say, we learned that even in the spring, right? The students were very forgiving and understanding. The things that they kind of missed in the spring was really not the quality of the instruction of their classes. They missed all the other things about being at school. And so I think that they understand that it's not going to be the way it was. So I think, let's move on to another, we could talk about this forever, but let's move on to another question, which is, what are the best practices in mentoring Black, Brown, and others who may experience discrimination? How best to help them grow and thrive despite challenges? Who wants to start that one? Chad?
I'm happy to take that one. Again, I think this is a case where showing some empathy, building some connection, knowing that it's not going to be the standard process that you have for every other student that may be more acclimated to the current way that we do things. And so it will take more time. For many students, because a lot of them are first generation. They may not understand things like the concept of office hours may be foreign to people. It's like office hours, like time in your office where you want to be left alone, or office hours when people are supposed to see you, right? And so explaining all of these hidden things will take more time. And I think making sure that students aren't isolated, bringing in cohorts of students, or making sure that they're connected, so that they have resources, so that when they get in trouble or they run into a difficult situation, they have people they can reach out to that can explain these things. I can say that this is that when I look at my career, when I've had good mentoring, it's worked well. And when I haven't had good mentoring, or at least some white male to vouch for me, it hasn't gone well. And so that's where I appreciate like Nancy and Maria, for instance, have provided continual mentoring and continual patience and understanding, because I just look different than not just physically, but just look different in terms of how I do things. And that has really helped me grow in my career.
So Chad, one kind of follow up I would ask you is, what should people do differently this coming year because of the COVID situation and the lack of in-person, interaction?
Persistence. Students may be suffering in silence, and they just don't know how to reach out, who to engage, and just making sure that they know that continually engaging them, even if you don't get a response, will be helpful, because at least they know that you care and you're out there, and when they're ready to engage you, they'll know that you're a resource. And that, I think that would be the number one thing.
Ellen or Maria, would you like to add anything?
Well, yeah, I was listening because, in fact, I still have some difficulty in mentoring African American students. Even though I had a PhD student, I had 2 PhD students, Native American, but the PhD level, you work kind of one-on-one. It's easier with the undergraduates. You have a large class, like, when I teach undergraduate AI, 150, 160 students. I see some Black faces in there. I never know. Do I have to try? Should I try to connect? If they come to my office hours, I can talk with them. I don't know if I try to connect with them explicitly, but I think I'm singling them out. I have lots of questions, and I really like to learn more. And I'm sure many of us have good intentions, but we just don't know the best way of doing things. So that's something we really need to learn from some people from this underrepresented groups.
Ellen, Chad, anything else? We have another related. Ellen, you're muted.
Yeah, I was wondering if Chad might actually be willing to take one of Maria's questions.
I was writing you back in chat, so I didn't hear it. Can you repeat that, Maria?
So,
if you have like in class, in a large class, and you have, you can kind of see in the classroom, I see some Black students. Right? I don't know the students individually. I have 160, 170 students. Does it make sense for me to try to reach explicitly to them? How, when? I don't want to single them out. I don't want them to feel they're different. I don't want to ignore them.
Right.
And it'd be kind of nice to have, again, a few quick tidbits. What's the best thing to do in those cases?
So one of the things that I mean, in our usual sort of in proximal sort of setting is I asked all the students to send me an email with their name and their picture. Now my class is about typically about 85 students, so maybe I can get away with that. But I also asked my core staff, like, can we go around and make sure that you've shaken hands with every student that we have in the class, so at least you've seen them and they know that you're there, right? I would also say one of my colleagues, I was very impressed that she did this. So Jenna Wines, who teaches the machine learning class, a huge class at Michigan, like 250 students. She meets with like groups. She meets with them in groups of 5 and spends 15 minutes to talk with them at the beginning of every semester. I don't know where she finds time to do that, but but I think that makes a huge difference in a big class, to not just to get to know the minority students, but to get to know every student who's and make sure that you have a class that cultivates a more of a community, I think.
So we can try to move to another question that's somewhat related. Does the institutional disruption happening in the current climate offer any new opportunities for racial justice in computing? So I don't know, Chad, do you want to start off on that one too?
Always happy to start off, but I don't want to, I could talk forever on all these things. I think if you talk to the minority students at Michigan, the thing that they would like to see change is the end of normalized grading. I think the curve really is sort of, they see that as something that weeds them out. And I think one of the things that we could do, this applies to all students, but I think it disproportionately affects minority students, is they feel like they're always under this sort of looming threat of being triaged from the discipline. And I think maybe we could offer something that has more of a growth mindset. It is kind of strange that we sort of we don't look at learning as we want you to learn and we can vary the amount of time that you can learn. We sort of have this fixed time, and if you don't learn in that time, then you're done. And I don't know how realistic that is in our how feasible it is in our current structures, but I think there is an opportunity to rethink how we do that. I just want to, because I believe that a lot of things stem from our undergraduate programs, because that is sort of, that affects the research. Your undergrads become your future. Some of those become your future researchers, and those become your future innovators of our understanding. And so I do see this as a pathway issue.
So I'm optimistic about the moment, and we've had a little chat in the Zoom chat about the moment in terms of being an awakening about what's been happening, and with respect to race and the United States in particular, and extending that to many parts of our lives, including the computing community and the education system and the research and the research community. And so I do feel like for what, for a set of complicated reasons, things are different now. Things seem different now. And I hear my colleagues, trying to figure out what this does mean, what it should mean, what can be done differently. And so I have optimism on that count. And I think this connection to the grading is a really important one. And that kind of going to a system that is demonstrating competency over variable time periods rather than in the same time period. I think that has a lot of merit. And maybe as COVID blows up education delivery for a period of time, maybe that also opens up an opportunity for some of that kind of thinking around assessment.
Well, let me add something. I mean, one thing that always annoys me is when faculty are proud of saying, oh, I had a midterm exam and the average was 35 out of 100, right? Oh, means I'm very good, right? And it really annoys me. I always try to do the opposite. I'm very annoyed with myself when I lose a student in the class. And I think it's an attitude that we have, in part because you have too many students. We don't have time to really work with each of them. So I think, one of the things we started doing in Minnesota, we started doing when the students are in the first computer science class, we offer a kind of seminar class, optional. We meet 2 hours a night, and we divide the students in small groups, whiteboard, pens, and they solve problems together. And we managed to cut down the failure and dropout rate in the first class. We discovered it was like 40%. When I saw the numbers, I say, this is insane. 40% of students can't make a CS1 class. It's our fault, right? It's not the student fault. And so we managed to cut it down to less than around 5 or 6%. And so that shows that we can, and in part, I think the students see, if you care about it, like Chad was saying, right? If you go around and talk with them, they see that you care about them. You're not just there to teach them. Then they start working much more. So I think there's really a lot that we have to do, try to rethink about the education in computer science. Because I don't see any way of, getting the women, talk about minorities, of course, all the women in there, unless we really say this is an environment where everybody can do well, and we have people doing it. We're doing a lot of work, and hopefully, we're going to come up with some of the general guidelines that people can use. Because it's insane. We lose the people at the beginning.
Can I jump in with one point on that? And that
Sure.
something that's different about computer science now than when I came up in the 90s, it's so much larger. There's so much of it. I don't think we now expect our graduate students to maybe get all of it in their coursework, but we sort of expect our undergraduates to do that. And I think when you look at discrete math and your data structures courses, we are packing more and more into that. And I think it creates, I think to the students, it feels more like a Hunger Games style, mentality where only the strong will survive. And I think it puts off a lot of students. And I think we could do more to broaden computing throughout the academy, while also internalizing. I don't think we want to leave it to the social scientists to solve our bias and fairness questions. I think there's things that we can do internally to do that. And that I think the way we teach our undergraduates and the research we do, the culture of our research labs are the ways that we can affect that rethink of our systems.
So I think a theme that's coming out, which, it's true for everyone, not just students, is people do respond better if you show you care about them and you want to help them succeed. And that's really what, mentoring, to me, what mentoring is all about. Let's shift to another question, which is it possible or advisable to differentially adjust service loads based on who has or who has not external complications due to COVID, like childcare, health, personal, non-work related issues? Ellen, you look like you want to pop
Yeah,
off.
I'll say something about this. And so I was a department chair for 7 years. I do think it's tricky. It's very hard to know everyone's situation, and it's probably not a useful path to go down to try to do a tremendous amount of differentiation. On the other hand, I think asking for volunteers from the faculty to take large service jobs, and sort of hoping or maybe having some direct conversations about how this time around it would be really great if those folks who do have fewer, for whom there are fewer added responsibilities because of COVID, could step up to these larger jobs this time through. And for instance, chair of faculty recruiting. Now chair of faculty recruiting, that's a time consuming job, and just making sure that actually we don't ask or somehow expect the person who's got a lot of extra workload because of COVID to take a large service role. I think that's a so a combination of a little bit of potential arm twisting plus asking for volunteers seems like a good thing to do. I liked how Laura, this could be a great reckoning time for how many committees do we really need, and how many people do we really need to have on those committees, and maybe we could streamline things a lot more than we have realized in the past, and that could then be valuable going all the way forward. There was a time period where I taught where my office was in a building that was quite a hike to campus, and I was pretty annoyed about that. And I only half jokingly said that I thought we should adjust the teaching load to reflect the fact that we had to hike from this distant building to campus to teach our classes. And nobody ever bought into that, but it's a little bit in the same flavor of, disparate burden. But I think the volunteer and arm twisting is the better, and streamlining, that those are the ways to go on that kind of an issue.
Can I offer? I know we're talking to people that lead departments and so forth, but one of the bigger obligations, I think, service-wise, is reviewing program committees and editing. And I would hope that people in our community just sort of have some understanding that if we don't get your paper back to you, a decision back to you, as soon as we hoped, right? That doesn't mean that we just be patient with some of those delays. And I think that also comes about with respect to merit review panels. I think we have more submissions going out than we can possibly review that quickly. And so I think there should be some sort of mutual understanding about the timeliness of review feedback.
Let me add one thing. I think in academia, most people love to come up with rules, right? Everything is to be very complicated. Think about, curriculum decisions. Oh, this, 1 credit, extra credit. Now put this comma. Put when you write the proposal for a new class. You go through multiple rounds. At the end, nobody sees the description, right? I'm always annoyed with those things. And I think maybe one thing to think about really, can we streamline things? Even with students, we invent rules, right? I mean, rule not to do with academia, but I still remember. So the first time I taught the class in which the student had to write, variety intensive class. So I get all these assignments on paper, right? This is a number of years ago. And I see the name of the student written on the right margin, right? Lined up on the right. And second one the same. And then I ask, why do you put this? Oh, in high school, they told us if we didn't put on the right side, we're losing all the credit. Oh, interesting. And I understand, right? Because you can go through a pile of assignments and quickly see the names, right? If they are on the right, whatever. And we invent rules. And I always try really, and I think we should really, as a community, figure out which rules can we get away with. Because we invent rules for ourselves, for other people, and we spend a lot of time just because we like to have rules. I don't know how to convince, enough upper level people say, forget about those rules. I mean, classes, well, how much you have to talk about a new class? I mean, write half a page. Now we have to write 20 pages, right? Isn't that the case? And it's up to us. At the end, we are the academics. We invent those things. So maybe not everybody in the audience is academic. I don't know. Industry may have something similar, maybe. But I think, again, we could reduce our work, right?
So I think that we just heard one of Maria's pet peeves. I agree. Okay, so Ellen, you want to say something? No. So we have another question that's about a different type of mentoring, which I think is important, and it would be great to hear if you guys have some good insights on this. Have you explored ways to use peer mentors virtually? Faculty, maybe faculty mentoring each other's students, mentoring each other, just other kinds of mechanisms for, doing mentoring. Anyone have any?
So it seems like there's two parts to that. One is the peer mentoring piece and the other is the virtual piece. And so kind of, I think teasing those apart a little bit is worthwhile. On peer mentoring, so generally mentoring philosophy is that you should have a network of mentors. So you should have a bunch of people that you consider mentors that are good for different purposes at different points in time. Or if they're good for the same purpose, then at least you can get two opinions on the same issue, right? So you should have a network of mentors. And I think near peer mentors for faculty are really helpful. I found this is incredibly important to me in my own career. I had a collaborator, Ken Calvert, who some of you would know from he's been at the National Science Foundation recently. And we worked together with a couple students when I was junior, and he was also junior. He was only a little bit ahead of me. And I just learned a tremendous amount from watching somebody just a tiny bit more experienced in terms of mentoring students. That was one of the biggest areas that I took away by working together with students. And so I think near peer mentors can be incredibly helpful. And then the virtual part just, of course, does give you potentially access to a larger pool of such people, if you're not relying on running into them in the hallway. That can get a little complicated when you're trying to create relationships. The people that next door to you hopefully feel a bit more obligation and investment in your success than someone might at a different institution. But I think within the same research area, there are people who just really love to mentor and are good at it. And finding some of those who are not at your own institution, I think could really make a big difference.
I think one thing you just touched on at the end of your remarks, Ellen, which I think we are maybe not thinking enough about as an opportunity now, is since we're all remote anyways, your mentors can really be anywhere. And so we should maybe think about ways that we can facilitate those networks, even for people that we don't normally think about building those remote mentoring relationships. Maria.
Maybe one big thing. I mean, we should think about using students to mentor other students. I mean, I think most of us will do, like you have a master student, maybe they work with an undergraduate student, PhD student, work with master students, but also really promote a lot of this kind of lower level, more distributed mentoring. I do it all the time, so I think it works quite well. And even now with the remotely, I mean, everything is done on Zoom. I have even high school students. I often will bring the high school students. And I think sometimes we don't think about that even an undergraduate student can be a mentor for somebody else, right? Because we need a professor, otherwise they don't know how to do it. So I think we can try to do even more than what we did. I think it would be very useful.
I just wanted to plus one Ellen's comment about having a network of mentors. I think one thing that I often find myself telling students is that advisor does not always equal mentor, and that there will be mentors that you have across, various types of mentors that you would have across institutions at different levels. I think one of the things that's been really good to see is the grad cohort that the CRA runs for underrepresented minorities and people with disabilities, because I think that has helped build some good mentoring relationships across institutions, especially for students that feel isolated where they're at, and that feeling of isolation gets to the heart of one of the major problems we have for underrepresented minorities in computing.
Okay, so now we have a question that's kind of back to the COVID disruption in ability to do work. It's how to support colleagues whose research is disrupted beyond an increase in non-work responsibilities. In particular, things like they can't have access to their research test bed or their research participants, or they can't work in the field. Any thoughts on how to help those kinds to address those challenges?
That's super hard. I do a mix of work. Most of it doesn't require field work, but some of it does. And I had a trip planned for the second week of March, which I didn't go on. I think making sure those people are connected to others who have the same issues, even if not at your own university, to see what kind of best practices are emerging for doing, say, virtual field work. I think that's important. The tenure clock extension that many places are giving could make sense if you just, if the work really must have in-person, if your work really requires in-person field work. There may be no easy answer, that doesn't involve extending the tenure clock. I also think some kind of coaching about whether it's possible to diversify the research methods a little bit, to just give yourself a chance to have some successes that may not have been the ones that you were planning on, but a little bit of diversification in method, to recognize that, it may be a while before doing in-person field work really makes sense. So that kind of coaching, that can be hard if someone's really the method and that they know and that they rely on and that seems appropriate for the questions is very much field work. But maybe having them talk with someone who does a mixture of field work and not field work would be a good way to help expand thinking about diversifying the method portfolio.
Yeah, one area, at least in computer science, I think most of the work we can do wherever we are. Robotics is a tough one because often you need the real robots to do real things, and I don't really have much suggestion there except use simulation, which is not the right thing. But talking about the human subject, one thing that we discovered, it's nothing to do with robotics. So we're doing some experiments with the conversational agents, with the Wizard of Oz. And so we were doing experiments on campus with students. And then when we had to close, we had to move them online. And what we discovered, which is interesting, people talk more when they are on a virtual system than when they were in person. So there are things in which, again, you can take advantage of learning. So now we're trying to extend these studies. Try to take advantage of the fact that, when you want people to talk with a computer system, being alone with your computer, even you don't know you're either talking to a computer or not, makes you more talkative. And so we kind of look at all the dialogue conversation. It's very interesting how things are different. So sometimes, again, take advantage of the fact you have new situations and try to see how well they work.
I also would just hope that, maybe this is a chance to pop out of some of the local minima that you might be in terms of how you think about your work. I think we oftentimes get into the grind of the paper mill. We got to generate the next paper, the next result, and we got to keep this moving. But I think typically there's you only have like 1 to 3 major breakthrough ideas in your career. Maybe this is a time to actually do what people think professors do, which is sit around and think all day and think deep thoughts. Maybe it's the actual time to do that, and maybe plan out what could be other ideas or try something new and different, because it's a good time to experiment.
Well, I think that's a good note to end this session on. We're come to the end of our time, and I'd like to thank all the panelists. I think we had great introductory remarks and some really good questions from the audience, and thank you all. And I guess now we just pass the stage over to our conference organizers to say a few words.
All right. Thanks, Nancy, Maria, Chad, and Ellen. That was a fantastic panel. Really enjoyed it. This brings us to the end of the CRA virtual conference. I hope that you all enjoyed these last 2 days as much as I did. I was really inspired by what I learned and heard these last couple of days. And while it wasn't nearly the same as being together in beautiful Snowbird, Utah, there were some things that I thought really worked quite well.
Really enjoyed it. This brings us to the end.
I like the ability for questions to be shared and voted on. Several people noted that being virtual made this conference accessible to them, that they wouldn't have been able to attend an in-person meeting, pandemic or not. I want to thank James for co-organizing this meeting with me, and I want to thank all the presenters for their amazing contributions. Thanks also to Andy Burnett, the CRA staff, and David Goldstein at Smash Productions for their hard work and support. To you, James.
And of course, we want to thank all of you for joining us over the last couple of days. This virtual event seems to have gone very well, despite the handful of not surprising technical glitches that popped up. Engagement in Q&A was great, as Ron mentioned, and it helped a lot of people. A lot of amazing ideas and questions were raised. The videos of these talks and copies of the presentations are going to be made available online in the near future. We also hope that we'll be able to make videos of the Q&A sessions available, so watch for those. In particular, please watch your email for the post-event survey asking for feedback on the conference. Yeah, I know, another survey. But we really would value your input on how things went, what worked well and what didn't. Not that we're planning to do exactly this again, but we still think it will be very helpful. Last, let me thank Ron for all the work that he did to make this event happen as smoothly as it did. He thanked me, but really, I think Ron gets the lion's share of the thanks for everything that happened here. So, Ellen.
So I don't have a lot to add, so I will not keep you too much longer. I greatly appreciate everyone who contributed to making these last 2 days a valuable use of all of our time. I won't name any particular names. I do want to just shout out to the CRA staff who work very much behind the scenes on all of these issues. And if we were in person, we could recognize them in person. So we'll have to do that, settle for doing that virtually. So thank you all for your participation and enjoy what remains of your summer. Bye.